everyone, welcome. My name is Tiffany Hetland. I'm a partner in Husch Blackwell's Healthcare Practice Group. Welcome, this is the 7th webinar in our 8-part series in the Health Law and Innovation set. I'm excited to be here. I'm really excited about our guests. But first, I have to go through some scripted housekeeping items just to check a few boxes. So at the bottom of the audience console here, you'll see multiple application icons that you can use during the presentation today. If you have any questions during the webcast, please submit them via the question box. We're going to try to answer some of those questions during the presentation, but if we run out of time or if it's an item that needs a little bit fuller of an answer, we'll certainly follow up with you via email afterwards. A PDF of the presentation is available in the resources folder, and this program has been approved in many states for legal education hours. So to report your hours, you'll click on the CEU icon. A certificate of attendance, including the course number, is going to be emailed to you tomorrow to help with any of your reporting obligations. And we'll also be sending out a copy of the presentation for watching and sharing. One last item, towards the end of the program, there will be a short survey. We'd really appreciate if you would complete that. We try to set these up so that they're actually helpful to your specific business needs. So maybe there's an opportunity to do a deeper dive into one of these topics, and we just really appreciate your feedback. So that's it for kind of my mandatory talking points. Now I'm really excited to introduce our guests. So this is Katie Height and Karuna Rao. Katie is an executive business and finance professional who has over 25 years of experience in a broad range of industries. But most recently, for the past 14 years, she has been with Teva, and she's currently the Senior Vice President, Senior Advisor for North American Commercial. And Katie, I hope I got that right. That's a mouthful. That's a big job. And so Katie has experience in market access strategy, 340B, Medicaid, rebate contracting, patient assistance programs. Katie, I'm really excited. I think we're going to have a lot to talk about today, and we're really happy to have you and hear from a manufacturer perspective.
Thank you, Tiffany.
And then, absolutely. And we also have Karuna Rao. Prior to joining Centene, where she is now, Karuna was in private practice. She also has a history as in-house counsel for a large PBM and specialty pharmacy. And she's also, Karuna, am I correct that you are the Director of Corporate Compliance for a hospital system? Okay, yes. Wonderful. And then I believe, and then you've also worked for a large health insurer. So how exciting. That's a wide variety of experience, and we're excited to have you. I think today you're probably going to be talking largely about your current baby, which is the specialty pharmacy within Centene, but really excited to have your perspective from a lot of different healthcare areas.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Okay, so as you've probably seen in our invitation, the goal today is just to kind of chat about some of the pharmacy work trends that the three of us have seen and how that might end up impacting what we see in 2021. Obviously, it's been a really interesting time between 2020, just generally, and then with the recent election and some of the executive orders and a little bit of uncertainty about where things are going on the regulatory landscape. I think we'll have a lot to talk about. We're going to touch on a few kind of key areas. Obviously, there's not nearly enough time to get through everything, but we're excited to kind of tee some things up and hope all of you, find a little something to take away and maybe some ideas for managing, your business and your regulatory concerns. So with that, before we kind of dive in, wondering if everyone would be willing to go through a couple of poll questions. We're really wanting to know who we're chatting with today, so maybe we can tailor our thoughts. So the first one is, if you could just click on what best describes the organization that you're representing today, that would be great, and then we can kind of get a sense of what the breakdown is for our attendees. So I'll give everyone just a bit of time here to answer. Okay, let's take a look. All right, well, we've got a lot of others, so we'll do our best to guess at what that encompasses. And if nothing else, our 3% of pharmaceutical manufacturers will see a friend in Katie, and 25% are kind of Karuna's area. So hope that everybody gets a little something out of this. Secondly, just to get a sense of the roles that everyone plays who's attending, if you don't mind also answering what best describes the area that you support within your organization, that would be great. We'll see if we get a large volume of other again. Okay, lots of legal people on. So Karuna and I guess, will be talking to a lot of fellow lawyers. We've got compliance and risk management. Perfect. And then last but not least, at the very end, we're going to talk a little bit about some things that we've seen that are kind of driven by coronavirus in the pharmacy space. And so we're just wondering if you could share how coronavirus has impacted your operations, whether it's to a very high degree or you've been fortunate enough to see not a lot of change. Would love to kind of get a breakdown of that from the audience. Give everybody a couple more seconds to answer, and then we'll take a look. Okay. Well, that's kind of an interesting mix. I think that makes sense, and I think we're going to hear from Katie and Karuna in a bit about kind of different experiences they've had with their organizations. So good to know. So now that we've gotten that out of the way, we kind of know who we're talking to. Let me just kind of set up how Katie, Karuna, and I decided to break down the panel today. We thought it would be nice to chat about just a few high-level areas. So we're talking about fair market value and compliance with fraud, waste, and abuse laws is kind of bucket number one. Bucket number two is going to deal with everybody's favorite topic lately, 340B. Some of the recent challenges and changes that we've seen in that program. We'll then roll into some specialty pharmacy specific concerns and some of the data sharing issues that we've seen with specialty pharmacies and manufacturers and in some other contexts. And then finally, as I mentioned, we're planning to wrap up with talking about how COVID has impacted kind of every part of the drug delivery system, the degree to which it's done so, and what, if any, kind of lasting changes we think we're going to see in the space as a result. So I'm excited to dive into that. Just as a quick mention, I think some people define specialty pharmacy differently. For purposes of our presentation today, we are talking about the kind of manufacture, distribution, delivery of products that are very high touch for severe conditions. So things that have maybe a REMS requirement, that have special handling requirements, very high touch type drugs. So that's kind of the lens through which we're looking at this. So I guess with that, let's dive in on fair market value and some of the considerations around it when we're looking at arrangements. A couple of the key laws that we typically are worried about, as I'm sure all the lawyers painfully know on the call, are the federal anti-kickback statute and then the patient inducement prohibition. So, just as a brief legal primer, as I'm sure everybody knows, the anti-kickback statute is a federal criminal statute, and that prohibits the offering or the actual provision of something of value just in an effort to induce or reward a referral of business that would be payable by a federal healthcare program. And so we see that come up as kind of a repeat player when we're looking at arrangements between manufacturers and pharmacies, between pharmacies and providers, and in all kinds of contexts. And we'll get into that a little bit more in a bit. Patient inducement, similarly, will prohibits a person from paying or offering to pay a Medicare or Medicaid beneficiary something to induce their business. And so things like a pharmacy, offering maybe a large gift card to a patient in exchange for filling their drug. I know we've seen things at our local grocery stores and retail pharmacies, and those all have to be carefully structured to comply. And so just a couple of examples there to kind of set the table for some of the main legal frameworks we have to deal with when we're looking at this. So I think that's, everybody's probably tired of hearing from me. I'd really like to get to our panelists now. So just to kick things off, talking about fair market value and some of these arrangements that trigger fair market value and compliance concerns. Karuna, can you chat with us a little bit about some of the service arrangements that you typically see as a specialty pharmacy? I know we talk a lot about core and enhanced specialty pharmacy services. If you could share with us just a little bit about what the distinction is there and kind of what some of the, the pitfalls are, or some of the things that you look at when you're navigating that would be great.
Sure. Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here today. Typically, when it comes to specialty pharmacies, there are core services that a pharmacy offers. For example, prescription, receipt and processing, the product dispensing, refill reminders. Those are typical core services that a pharmacy provides to a patient, and those are not charged for in addition to whatever the reimbursement is from that payer. Benefit investigation also falls into that. Standard shipping falls into core services. Then you come into something else that we call enhanced or customized services. And those could be services that are obviously not part of our core package, but where the pharmacy could charge an additional fee to the manufacturer for providing that enhanced service. For example, customized data reporting. So if a pharmacy has a particular data suite that is part of its core data suite, it wouldn't charge for that. But if the pharmaceutical manufacturer wants something extra or on a more timely fashion, if they want it once a week rather than what our standard might be of once a month, we could charge for that. Targeted patient outreach, that's an additive pharmacy service. Any type of a shipment of product that includes a starter or a welcome kit, that would be an additional service that we would be providing to the pharmaceutical manufacturer. But something to keep in mind is that you can only charge for the actual cost of the shipment, absent a valid HIPAA authorization. So that's a little bit of a nuance there that people do need to understand, that you can't charge just any fee for that, but the actual cost that the pharmacy will undertake. Adverse event reporting has been something that's come to play in recent days, where you would charge perhaps an enhanced advanced event reporting per AE report. So if you're doing the typical MedWatch reporting, you don't charge for that because that would be a core service for most pharmacies. But if you're having to do adverse event reporting, for example, stomach ache, or if one of the adverse event reporting happens to be a temperature or a cough that are not part of a standard MedWatch report, you could potentially charge for that. Program management fees is another one where you could charge. You typically want to charge a flat fee for those types of services. Those are just a sampling of enhanced services. There are many others that could potentially fall into that mix, but those are the high level ones that we see most routinely that manufacturers are asking for.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So I guess, Karuna, you touched on a couple of things, like welcome packets, program management. I don't know about you, but I've seen specialty pharmacies be asked by manufacturers as part of, a welcome kit or something like that to include questionable swag. And Katie, this is not an insult to you or to anyone on the phone, but I'm just curious, can you talk a little bit about, have you seen anything crazy, that's it's so loosely related to the dispense that it almost makes you chuckle, like a branded, set of AirPods or something like that? And in turn,
well,
then,
I haven't seen the branded set of AirPods, but you do see interesting items.
Just a silly example.
you do see interesting items. I mean, sometimes there are backpacks that are included, blankets. I mean, I have not seen anything completely crazy, but you still need to make sure that whatever you're providing as part of that welcome kit or starter package or however it's labeled, meets the monetary threshold, and it's not something that's there to induce or promote that product to an undesirable extent. If the pharmacy has enough structure around it where they can actually say these types of, I'm just loosely using the word incentive and not at all inflammatory way. If you can exclude the government type payers, the federal payers from receiving those, that would be a nice way to protect the pharmacy. I don't know if it's always practical to be able to get to that level of detail before a shipment goes out, but that is a way to protect the pharmacy.
And so, Katie, from the manufacturer side, is that something you've seen done? And obviously you're not on the legal side, so I'm particularly excited to hear from you from, kind of a business and strategy side. Have you seen things go out in welcome kits that, you feel strongly about and you think it's an important part of kind of the patient's experience, or is that not really something that's come up for you?
It really has not come up. I mean, the laws changed so dramatically quite some time ago that it's pretty limited what is in there. So that's not something I got heavily involved in.
Fair. So I guess, Katie, just to kind of stay on you for a minute. So as a manufacturing company, how do you go about, and why would you, what's the reason to pay a specialty pharmacy for those enhanced services? Can you talk to us a little bit about kind of the value proposition for the manufacturer?
Sure. So, obviously the profile of the product matters. You both have touched on, it's a high touch product. It could be a cold storage product, a titration. One of the other areas that I would like to mention too is where you have a really low compliance. It's a difficult patient. You may pay for, although there's follow-up calls provided as part of the core services, you may pay additional monetary value for a robust compliance and adherence program that the pharmacy can help offer, especially on a high-priced drug. The manufacturer, the insurance company, all parties involved, don't want to see a patient take a product and then stop taking it because the outcome's not going to be good. So on certain profile patients, strong compliance and adherence programs really help the patient outcome. And that would be something that you would pay for additional services. Any kind of a high touch, like I talked about, it just depends on the product profile. But what we would typically do is if it's something out of a core service, if it's something new that we haven't done in the past, we would seek out a third-party evaluation just to make sure that what we are paying is bona fide and it will pass all the tests.
Perfect. That makes sense. Now, Karuna, and I don't want to get too much into asking questions about your specific business, but just generally speaking, as a specialty pharmacy, are you looking to have your own third-party evaluation for those kinds of core and enhanced, well, I guess of course, but the enhanced service fees? Do you ever, A, I guess, is that something you do? And B, do you ever see where you and a particular manufacturer disagree both on value and whether something is enhanced or not?
So we do a range for a service. So for example, it could be, for data reporting, for example, it could be a range of, and these are just made up numbers, not at all associated with what we may charge, but a range of 1,000 to 5,000. And the way we've structured it is if anything comes in below or above that fair market value range, it needs to be reviewed by compliance and legal as to why we're deviating from our fair market value range. And we do have disagreements or different interpretations of what might be enhanced or what might be core with pharmaceutical manufacturers. And we work those out on a case-by-case basis. Usually, it's business to business, but sometimes, we do have legal to legal involved. And I think from my perspective, having those legal to legal calls are actually beneficial. I think we cut out a lot of the back and forth between the businesses and really get to the crux of the matter. And we can explain why we believe it is enhanced or it is core, and we get to a happy medium in most cases. And I think that is actually very beneficial to me. So I try to keep, once I have a contact at pharma, I try to save that contact and reach out to them if we have another agreement that we're discussing, because I have found that to be extremely valuable.
Absolutely. It's nice when you can find that one special person on the other side and constantly partner with them. I know I've got some folks at manufacturers that I bother on a routine basis. Those calls are helpful. So I guess, Katie, I mean, do you have anything to add there in terms of just any final thoughts about, you know, kind of some of the service offerings, the way that you've seen Teva contract for them, and anything to close with there?
No, I mean, it's pretty straightforward for us. You know, we know what the core services are. We have a chart, you know, just like Corinna talked about, where we have a range of what we have already validated as bona fide fees. And when we do something new and different, we just seek outside counsel on it.
Perfect. Like Husch Blackwell.
Right.
And I think it's important to note that the range of fees might differ from pharmacy to pharmacy. So what may be, in my example, of $1,000 to $5,000 for a data set may be $5,000 to $10,000 for another specialty pharmacy for the same data set, because of the effort that may need to be involved in order for them to produce that data. Or it may be less. So really it is dependent on that particular pharmacy. So there isn't one standard fair market value evaluation for a particular data set across the industry.
Corinna, I think that's a fantastic point, and that's exactly why, you know, I was asking you about specifically getting your own valuation, because I agree. I think it's really important for, you know, someone who's coming into a contracting situation like this to have their own valuation, because just as you said, it's not really one size fits all. It's going to depend. So, okay, well, I know, wow, we're already at 12:22. I feel like we could probably go on and on with this topic. We should probably move on, though, just in the interest of time. But I guess in terms of tying things out, you know, fair to say for a closing summary that core and enhanced services need to be established. They need to be clearly contracted for. We need to make sure that, you know, any services that are being provided are actually contemplated in a contract and paid for, and that everything is within an independent fair market valuation. Does that sound like a fine summary of things, Corinna and Katie?
It does.
Great.
Okay. Perfect. All right. Well, so moving on, again, I know that this is probably a topic that has impacted, you know, the different organizations listening in differently, and there are probably some strong feelings about it, but we kind of want to talk a little bit about some of the recent 340B program developments. I'm sure everyone's well aware, but just to be clear, the 340B program is one that effectively requires manufacturers whose drugs are covered by Medicaid to offer certain covered outpatient drugs to so-called 340B covered entities at a deeply discounted price. And those 340B covered entities tend to be dish hospitals, certain grant facilities, there's a whole list. But the long and short of it is, the idea behind it is that the savings they realize between purchasing the drug at that deeply discounted 340B price and receiving the same reimbursement they normally would from a payer, those savings provide them with a financial boost to kind of continue doing their work in the community. That's at least what the program is predicated on. So with that, I mean, Katie, I'd love to throw this to you, because I think the manufacturer perspective is really interesting right now, as we've seen some manufacturers in the space take some actions to, you know, either require more data or to say they won't provide drugs through contract pharmacies, period, or they're limiting contract pharmacies. Can you tell us a little bit, you know, just very candidly, how do you feel about that, and what interests are the manufacturers seeking to protect there?
So we are currently assessing the 340B program at our company right now, and definitely following what's going on in the news. You know, there have been several different approaches so far. Some of them are going to end up in lawsuits. Some of them are throwing a lot of confusion into the industry for all the players, right? People don't know if they're allowed to send the data, who owns the data. There's a lot of, privacy issues there. But the real crux of the matter is that the program was designed for a very good purpose to support the indigent population. And I think that a lot of manufacturers have known for a long time that we've got a large amount of duplicate discounts in the system in this program, but it was a cost of doing business. And as the 340B program has expanded exponentially and continues to grow, those duplicate discounts have become a big problem for the manufacturers, along with the fact that rebates over the past 5 to 6 years have grown extensively as well. So where it used to be a cost of doing business, the manufacturers really cannot afford to keep doing that anymore. What happens is that you ship the product out the door, it comes back via a chargeback for the 340B discount, but then that product can make its way to a commercial or Part D patient. And when you're paying rebates on those same products, it really leaves the manufacturer in a bad position. Most of the 340B products that have been on the market for a long time are at penny pricing anyway. And if they happen to have a high WAC price and a high rebate, then the manufacturer is really underwater. And I think that's kind of what you're seeing in the industry now is an attempt to try to solve that problem, not an attempt to deny patients access to these products, but to stop the revenue leakage that goes on in this segment of the business.
And to be clear, Katie, when you're talking about duplicate discounts, you're talking about more than kind of duplicate discounts as a term of art for 340B, where we're talking about there being Medicaid involved. You're talking about duplicate discounts in that you, the manufacturer, may have an agreement with a particular payer or with a PBM to pay commercial rebates, and you're kind of eating it on both sides, to put it crassly. Is that fair?
That's
I just
fair.
want to be clear about this. Okay.
Yeah,
So just out of curiosity, Katie, and this may not be a fair question, just your impressions. So who do you see as being responsible to guard against the sort of commercial duplicate discounts? Do you think that's a function of tighter contracting and monitoring on those rebate agreements that the manufacturers are entering into? It seems like some of the things we've seen launched put a certain onus upon the covered entity to, furnish data or put, processes in place that are designed to prevent those commercial duplicate discounts. And again, I'm not trying to ask a loaded question. I'm just genuinely interested from kind of a business and strategy perspective, what your thoughts are.
Well, I think it's actually very difficult to identify each individual script as a 340B because sometimes it takes place in the background. And so that is the reason why the manufacturers are asking for the script data, because when the claims come in for them to pay a rebate on, they have that script level data because that's the basis for paying the rebate. If they have access to the 340B script data, then they can prove at 100% that they have already given that 340B discount. They can show that to that payer or the PBM, and then that claim would be disputed and kicked out of the system. I don't even believe that the payers and the PBMs are aware up front that a script is 340B when it's filled, because a lot of times that's done in the background.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. I think that's definitely one of the operational challenges because so many of these are kind of a virtual inventory model. And so to your point, you're exactly right. Once the claim has adjudicated, there's then a determination made that it was 340B eligible and reconciliation performed. So I hear what you're saying there.
I mean, there is a concept out there right now that would make the 340B entity basically file for a rebate. And therefore, the manufacturers would have that script level data as opposed to processing as what's called a chargeback. Then that would work, but there's a cash flow issue that goes on. There's a lot of data set up that needs to be done. But in theory, that would work. The enhanced program of having the pharmacy submit the script level data on a platform so that the manufacturers can have access to it is out there now. But people are struggling with how to make it work. What are the privacy issues? Who owns the data?
Yeah, I think you definitely nailed it with the privacy issues. Karuna, you may have seen a little bit of this, as a contract pharmacy, just hearing from your covered entities, but I know for sure Husch Blackwell has certainly fielded a lot of calls from covered entities about, those various data issues. And every time there's a new suggested program rolled out, it certainly, raises more of those questions.
Yeah, we have heard from some of our covered entities. So our pharmacy is a contract pharmacy to the FQHCs. And in that respect, we contract directly with them. But for the privacy issues, they are definitely something that needs to be addressed. There may be some arguments where maybe you enter into kind of a data aggregator type agreement as a business associate of the FQHC in order to obtain that data. But those are things that still are being ferreted out, is my understanding.
I think you're exactly right. I know we've definitely seen kind of some questions fielded about, who's really performing, any kind of de-identification services for whom? The manufacturers have selected a platform and some kind of a third party who's working with it. And then the question becomes for the covered entity, well, you're not my business associate. And so I think it can get, that's probably a whole other panel that we could do. But yeah, suffice to say, I think there are some challenges right now. And I think there's a lot to navigate if you're a covered entity who's getting those kinds of data requests. And again, Katie, I really appreciate your candor, because I think it is important to hear that, while some people may disagree with some of the more aggressive stances that some manufacturers have taken, as you said, I think Teva has taken a little more of a thoughtful approach and looking into things. And it's fair that, you may well be underwater on some drugs and, you want to see the program achieve its purpose. But, at a certain point, I understand, as a manufacturer, you can't be losing that much money. So it'll be really interesting.
Yeah, I think it's going to take everybody really coming to the table to sit down to solve it. And people want to have to do that. Otherwise, the manufacturers are really going to start bucking this program. And it's a good program. I mean, it was put out there for a good cause, right? And I don't think anybody denies that. I think what's happened is it's kind of gotten out of control.
That's fair. I think there's certainly been a frenzy of activity, and I don't think that we'll see that slowing down anytime soon. So I agree. Hopefully, everybody can get to the table and find something. So just to put a bow on your mention of being a contract pharmacy, so do you all kind of have a fair market value opinion for your dispensing fees? Do you have any kind of special parameters in place when you're dealing with a 340B covered entity and serving as their contract pharmacy?
We do have a fair market valuation for the class of drugs that we engage. So we did go to outside counsel for that. And we get that refreshed periodically.
Okay, I think that's a great practice. So I guess any closing thoughts from either of you? I mean, I'll just throw out there that I think it's interesting to have the two of you together, because one of the things that we've been seeing are certain manufacturers saying that either they won't dispense through contract pharmacies anymore, or you're limited to one or two. And so, Karuna, I'm interested to hear, I mean, do you foresee that some of your, kind of contract pharmacy relationships may start to go down, either because there are fewer drugs being processed through that contract, or, the FQHC or whatever relevant 340B covered entity is having to sort of cut down the number of pharmacies it's dealing with?
We have seen that. So we do see that the number of contract pharmacies, or the number of scripts, even though we are a member of, we are a contracted pharmacy, has gone down. I think they're trying to utilize less number of contract pharmacies just for probably ease of administration is my guess on that. But it's not anything really different than limited distribution products and pharmaceutical manufacturers contracting with a network of pharmacies of sometimes, 2, 3, 4, trying to maintain some level of competency with those pharmacies.
That's fair. Okay, well, in the interest of time, I'm going to scoot us along to specialty pharmacy contracting. Again, I'm sorry, I think we could probably have spent the hour altogether talking about 340B, but I want to touch on this next issue. So, Karuna, I think we're going to rely on you pretty heavily to get the ball rolling here. But as the general counsel to a specialty pharmacy, I'm guessing you're kind of balancing a lot. You're balancing business concerns, you're dealing with manufacturers, you're dealing with patients, you're balancing legal and regulatory and compliance issues. Could you just kind of give us a little overview of what some of the hot button issues are that you're looking at day to day as a specialty pharmacy general counsel?
Sure. I mean, I can tell you that our parent corporation, Centene Corporation, takes the privacy of patient data extremely seriously. So, and that funnels down to all of its subsidiaries as well. So when it comes to data sharing, we take the position that it is pharmacy data. Pharmacy receives the script to fill that prescription for a patient, and it is the pharmacy's data. We do enter into agreements with pharmaceutical manufacturers where they do need certain level of data in order to do some cost reporting or even payment of commissions to their sales folks. But of course, pharma doesn't want any identifiable information, and we certainly won't give any PHI to a pharmaceutical manufacturer. Now, not all pharma can aggregate all the data together at one time with all the different specialty pharmacies that might be filling their prescriptions. So what they have done in many instances is enter into an agreement with a third party, which is the data aggregator. We don't actually have, as a specialty pharmacy, an agreement for services with that data aggregator, but we have a business associate agreement with that data aggregator for de-identification and data aggregation services. So we can provide then the PHI to that data aggregator because they would be our business associate, because we are asking them to provide services that we could otherwise provide directly but are choosing not to. And then that data aggregator has an agreement with the pharmaceutical manufacturer for the services. And then they get paid whatever fee they get paid by the manufacturer.
Okay, that's helpful. And I feel like, I don't know if you agree with this, but it seems like, there've always been a lot of data issues when you're talking about, being a pharmacy, because as you pointed out, you have an obligation to the patient to protect their information, but then there's a huge amount of value, competitive safety, research and development in manufacturers having that data. So I think it's always been there, but I've at least seen probably over the past couple of years, it seems like a huge uptick in the questions that I get, in the complexity of the proposed arrangements. It just seems like that's become a lot more the day-to-day for someone who's in the specialty pharmacy space. Is that kind of what you're seeing as well?
Yeah, I think you summed it up well. That's a fair statement.
Okay. So Katie, I'd like to hear from you. Can you talk to us a little bit about, from a non-legal perspective, and as, kind of obviously very high up in strategy with a manufacturer, tell us about the value of the data and sort of, what you all want to do with it and how you sort of approach interacting with pharmacies and making sure that patient information is protected.
So the main reason we would get the data is for processing a rebate claim. Or for paying some kind of a fee to that pharmacy or to a health plan or PBM. The data is, there's certain fields that we have to have. We have a system, most pharmacy manufacturers have a system where they take the data in, they scrub it, meaning that it has different test protocols to make sure that it's RNDC, it's not a duplicate. It's a valid pharmacy that dispensed the product, et cetera. And that is really the main reason we use that data. We would also use it for analysis on how a contract is performing. If we are paying a rebate for a certain position of our product on formulary, we will use that data for analysis for each one of those accounts to see if a contract is performing as it should. And quite frankly, we use the data to check compliance with the contract.
That's fair. So it sounds like a huge piece of, at least where you sit from a business chair, value the data is in sort of validating rebates and making sure that you have enough to back up the payment of a rebate to a payor.
That is correct. And these contracts are pretty complicated anymore. I mean, you can have numerous options within a contract for your product. And so you have to validate that that particular script earned that particular rebate option. It seems to have gotten more complex over time, but that's the main reason for it.
Yeah. So I guess to both of you, as kind of whoever raises your hand first, do you see a little bit of tug of war ever between interpretations of the various parties on who owns the data?
I have seen, and we do protect the data as much as we can. It's certainly an interesting argument when I hear from pharma that they think they own the data. So we do push back on that.
And to be clear, Katie never makes that argument, but
I would not make that argument. We do not own that data.
I've not heard Teva make that argument.
Our main intent on getting that data is just basically to pay a rebate. If we're not paying a rebate, then we don't get the data. We don't get the data on competing products unless there's some kind of a market basket agreement. But those have really kind of gone by the wayside. But I would say my position is that pharma does not own that data.
That's fair.
And this is one of the instances where a legal to legal call was extremely helpful. I mean, it may have made it into their template agreement because many times we use pharma's template agreements for their products. And in those cases, somehow it was couched as pharma's data. And, we pushed back and it went through several iterations within the business back and forth on red lines where neither party was going to give on it. So I said, look, I just need a legal contact. And then we actually did come to a resolution that was, once they understood why we were taking the position we were, it was easy to negotiate. So I think having those contacts within the pharmaceutical manufacturer, within the legal department or compliance department, whomever is making those decisions is invaluable.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know about you, but I've also found that within a lot of my clients, the many different types of entities, knowing someone who is in IT or sort of in, the weeds of the actual data systems and putting together the file layouts, that is also very helpful because I certainly, I'm a bit of a rube when it comes to that. And so it's nice when you can find someone in IT who can sort of tell you where the rubber meets the road based on what you've contracted or what you think you're talking about. Have you guys found that as well, that IT can be a good partner?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I agree. I mean, this data is massive, especially if you have a product in a therapeutic area that is, one of the top disease states. So the data coming in is massive and you need to have IT, but, I always say I have my attorney and my IT director right by my side because at the end of the day, the only time you really need a contract is when people don't agree on things. So, so you've got to have the legal team right there by you.
Perfect. And I guess just a last question to kind of tie this out. Curt, I'm curious, you talked about, the notion of having a data aggregator and, kind of that tokenization process to anonymize patient data. Is there anything that you've seen your organization kind of take in-house? Like perhaps you've gone out and got an expert opinion about, what all fields you could have and still be technically de-identified? Are you putting together any of your own reporting, or are you typically seeing that there's an aggregator involved?
We also do our own reporting, and we follow the guidelines of, the 18 HIPAA identifiers get stripped out. So that's how we've always done it. We've taken a very conservative approach.
Okay. Excellent. So guys, I think we're slightly behind, but moving along, and I really want to make sure that we have time for this. I'd like to talk a little bit about COVID. I'm sure people are a bit weary of that, but I think it has created some interesting trends in the drug delivery space generally. And so just wondering if, both of you could kind of chat about what you've seen in your organization, whether it's interruptions in supply chain or whether it's, been interesting to see that, maybe you can attract more talent from further away, or you've seen a positive uptick in telehealth encounters. Just would like to hear kind of the good and the bad that I hate to say the good with COVID, but just some of the interesting trends you've seen for your organizations.
Sure. So Centene did not historically have a work from home policy. So all of the work was really done on site at one of the Centene locations or subsidiary locations. With COVID, we had to do a quick about face and get everybody that wasn't necessary to be in the office to be able to work from home. And I think we were able to do that within 2 weeks. People were deployed laptops. Centene went above and beyond for the people that had to work from home by providing some stipends in order to, if they had to upgrade to some type of internet provider that they didn't have, and things like that, just to get them to be able to work from home. We didn't really see a whole lot of interruption on the specialty pharmacy side. Did a very good job at deploying all of that. The organization is still work from home until now, April of 21, as a conservative measure. And so then we will do a phased approach of going back into the office. But we didn't really see a whole lot of delays from a pharmacy dispensing or fulfillment perspective.
That's fantastic. And I think when you and I were chatting the other day, you made a really interesting point that I'm embarrassed to say hadn't really occurred to me. I think we're seeing in the news, or we certainly saw towards the beginning of this, oh no, there's going to be delivery in mail or in FedEx deliveries or UPS, given everybody ordering from online. And that's just going to impact people's ability to receive delivered medications. But you pointed out, well, we already have to deal with that. When there's hurricanes every year, there's tornadoes. And so I liked your point that, without discounting some of the hardships that have come about with drug delivery, it sounds like specialty pharmacies are already largely equipped to make sure that, there is some way to get the drug to the patient, when there's a natural disaster. They're already set up to flip to another location perhaps, or to look at alternative delivery means.
Right. I mean, that's an option, but we really haven't had to really flip to an alternative pharmacy location. But for example, maybe FedEx, instead of getting it the next day, maybe they're getting it day 2. So, and those are just delivery options that we just schedule with the patient, so they're informed of when they're going to get their medication. So a lot of it is communicating with the end user, the patient, so they're fully aware of when their medication should arrive, and they're not have an expectation of next day delivery, for example.
Right. So Katie, do you want to chat about what you've seen at Teva with some of the shift?
Sure. I think my company really did a great job adapting to what was going on. We did not have a work from home policy either. We had it's in office, right? So we did let everybody work remote. We were already set up with laptops and things. We did deploy Zoom for meetings very quickly. A large part of our workforce was essential anyway, just because we are manufacturing and distributing product. And so we took great caution in bringing people back. Right now, everyone is back except mainly the home office people. And we're currently scheduled to come back into the office on a part-time basis starting in January. But we continue to adjust that just based on what goes on with this virus. I will say the one area of our workforce that has been impacted the most, and that's the same for everyone, is our sales force. They haven't been able to go in to see doctors. They can't get into hospitals, clinics, things like that, just because of that. So We have deployed other virtual assets for them to use, but that has been the group that's probably been hit the hardest. In some of the research that we've done, we find that certain therapeutic areas probably will not go back to the office and will remain with the telehealth approach. And that's going to require us to adjust, our sales detailing that we do. But I think our company handled it well. We have very limited cases of it, and we were able to keep our product and our supplies still flowing. So I'd give us an A for that.
Oh, that's excellent. And I think you had mentioned to me, Katie, that you guys really didn't see a huge supply chain interruption in terms of any of your kind of raw materials, if you will. It sounded like it was smoother than one might expect.
We've had our issues. We've been able to deal with it. We did see stockpiling in different parts of the world that at the very beginning of the virus back in the March, April timeframe, but that has settled out. But so far we've been able to stay the course. I ranked the impact as moderate. Hopefully that we'll get back to normal, whatever that's going to be. But we've been able to keep everything going.
That's great. I guess just a couple of things. I don't know that this is necessarily specific to the manufacturer or the specialty pharmacy space, but I'd just be curious to hear from you guys on whether you think, as hopefully we get a vaccine and things improve, are we still going to see an increase in, telehealth encounters, an increase in telepharmacy services? Do you think that COVID has kind of ended up, shifting some of the delivery of care and some folks may not go back to a traditional office? I mean, what are your thoughts there?
I think you are going to see that. I mean, our company's position is that we will be in the office, but I have talked to others that they see no reason to return to the office. So I think that you're going to see a mix. I think that telehealth is here to stay. Some people like the in-person visits, but for some people, it's very difficult to get to a doctor's office. So for that portion of the population that getting there is a struggle already, this is a great solution for them. So I don't think some of the changes that we've experienced will go away. I think some of them will take root. And I think you'll see differences in how we detail our products to physicians, how we launch products. I think it's all going to be impacted.
Yeah, I agree with what Katie just said. I think telehealth is here to stay. And I think companies may be looking at different options when, maybe they will be doing more of a work from home aspect if they can. So I think that's all to be played out in 2021 when we start returning to the office.
I think it's going to be interesting, and I'll just throw in as kind of a pharmacy regulatory nerd. One thing that I think is interesting is that, different states have different licensure schemes for what they call an internet pharmacy. And, the definitions vary wildly, but for some, it turns on how many of your prescriptions actually are generated from some kind of an online encounter. And there's kind of a poor definition of what online encounter is. So I think it'll be interesting, as we see certainly a sustained pattern, potentially a continued uptick in telehealth encounters and prescriptions written pursuant to those, whether, maybe some states or the NABP are sort of pushed to come up with some more specifics and some definitions that recognize that pharmacies that are filling a high percentage of prescriptions that generate from telehealth aren't really an internet pharmacy, per se. So just had to throw that in a little, like I said, regulatory nerd note, but that's something I'm kind of excited to see in 2021. So any final thoughts on COVID, Karuna or Katie?
No. Nothing
ready for it to go away.
I think we all are. I certainly agree with that. I'm just checking to see if we had any questions come in that we can toss out to you guys. I'm not sure if I'm opening the correct box here. Let me just check. And I apologize to everyone who's watching, I have not moderated on this platform before, so I'm sorry you're probably seeing me look away and click around. I'm just trying to orient myself here. So I'm not able to find where the questions are. We'll certainly respond via email if there have been any. I guess just within these final few minutes, you know, Katie and Karuna, since we have the benefit of your time, is there anything else that you want to share with us just about your day-to-day or any trends that you think we're going to see in 2021 that you're interested in?
Well, we talked a little bit about it already. I think the telehealth is here to stay. I think the typical pharma model for launching a product with a large sales force is going to adapt to the restrictions that the industry is going to put on you know, people coming into clinics and hospitals and doctors' offices. So I think that's going to be a permanent change. I just don't know how that's going to roll out. I think the supply chain issue will be dealt with at some point. You hear a lot of, you know, political talk about our supply chain and how it is, it's not in the U.S. anymore, and there's a reason for that. And so I think we'll see more advancement there, or at least more discussion there about where the supply chain is located and just the whole distribution model itself.
Yeah, I would echo the sales force. I know our sales force also can't go into doctors' offices as frequently or how they were before COVID, and that's impacted some of the salespeople as well. I think if they can get some type of teleappointments maybe with the prescribers, that might be a way. But again, it's the time of the prescribers that you're dealing with. So I think it's just going to be monitoring and trying to find how to navigate in this new normal.
I think that's a great note to end on. Guys, I can't thank you enough. It's been so great to have you here. As I mentioned, if anyone sent any questions in, we'll take a look at those. We can follow up with you via email. And then I just need to cover a couple more housekeeping notes. Just a reminder, the program is covered for CLE credit. And so if you just go to the CEU icon at the bottom of your screen, you can report those hours. We will be sending out that certificate of attendance. It'll have the course number and whatever information you need if you're submitting directly for credit. We will be sending a recording of this webcast out if you want to share it with anyone or look at it again. And then finally, just a quick little plug for one, our short survey. We would love to hear back from you so that we can kind of tailor our programming. And then number two, and I think this follows on really nicely from what we just talked about, please feel free to join us next Thursday. It's the 8th session of 8, our final one before Thanksgiving. And we're going to be talking about kind of a legislative outlook and seeing what's coming down the pipeline in health law in 2021. I think it's going to be a great program, and we hope everyone will join for that. So Katie and Karuna, one more time, thank you so much. It was really great to chat with you guys, and we so appreciate your time.
Thanks, Tiffany.
Thank you for the invitation. Appreciate it.
Thank you.